Hello my spooky crew and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if this is your first time here. My name is Alex and welcome to my spooky corner of the internet. First of all, I want to say thank you for 1,000 subscribers. That's amazing. Thank you all so much for your support and for being a part of my little YouTube community. Speaking of community, click on the community tab on my channel. There I'll be posting discussion questions, polls, photos, and all sorts of good stuff. And plus you can meet like-minded people who also like the spooky stuff. And who doesn't love that? On one of my polls, I asked about what topics you all would like to see me do, and it was pretty clear that you all wanted a paranormal how-to video. So here's the first of what I hope will be many how-to videos. And today's how-to is all about how to talk to ghosts. You've gone to the location, you set up your equipment, you're sitting in the dark, and nothing. What do you do? But before I dive in further, be sure to subscribe to my channel, give this video a like, and click on that notification bell so that you know when I upload a new video. If you subscribe and you don't click on the bell, you may never hear from me again. And if you want more spooky stories, ghost hunting tips, or you want more information about my books, you can visit thespookystuff.com. Alright, let's get started. As we dive into the topic of how to talk to ghosts, it's important to know where the current style of ghost communication came from. So the earliest form of ghost hunting that we know of actually goes back to the spiritualism movement in the 1800s and the Fox sisters. When they made contact with an alleged spirit by the name of Mr. Splitfoot, which is also another name for the devil, they were asking the spirit to make rapping sounds. So like for yes and no, like knock once for yes, knock twice for no. And then they were also using rapping to help name letters of the alphabet, like A would be 1 knock, B would be 2 knocks, C would be 3 knocks, that sort of thing. And we know that this later caught on as the spiritualism movement that happened all over the country. And we know now that the Fox sisters fabricated a lot of their work, including Mr. Splitfoot. But that didn't stop spiritualism from becoming a full-out religion. Now, personally, I think there were some legit mediums during the spiritualism movement. And we also know that spiritualism had a sharp rise during and after the Civil War because the Civil War violated something that was known as the good death. People died at home, they were buried in the family plot. Civil War changed all of that. You had people dying on the battlefield and being thrown into a ditch most of the time. And also we know that during the Civil War, embalming was invented and funeral parlors came into emergence. But that's a whole other topic for another time. Death turned into, from what used to be a close and intimate thing, into this thing where we're very separated from it. We're very separated from death. We don't talk about death much. We don't want to think about death because who wants to think about their own demise? But we still had a curiosity for spirit communication. People wanted to get messages from their loved ones that they may not have been able to say goodbye to. And this is something that never stopped. And what I found really interesting with spiritualism, especially with seances and whatnot, you have things like trances, and you still have the rapping sounds like knock once for yes and twice for no. And this is a technique that ghost hunters still use a lot even today. So we're at spiritualism, and as the years go by, we have folks like Harry Price, Harry Houdini, who was debunking a lot of the mediums. And we also had Hans Holzer, Maurice Grosse, the Society for Psychical Research, the Ghost Club, Ed and Lorraine Warren. All of these people were trying to find answers to the supernatural mystery of spirits. And they were all doing it their own way. Like Ed and Lorraine Warren had more of a religious-based approach, and they were also really trying to take on demons. Whereas Harry Price was going for more of a scientific angle, and one could say Hans Holzer was too. And what I really liked about Hans Holzer is he was one of the first people to start using mediums during his investigations, and those mediums were used as a tool between the spirit world and the physical world. And of course we know with Harry Price, he was regarded as one of the original ghost hunters, and while he didn't have a degree in science, he was a researcher, and he was very heavy in self-promotion, and he even had like more of a character that he portrayed to the media. But he still did good work in the paranormal. Of course, was it perfect? No. Was Hans Holzer perfect? No. Were Ed and Lorraine Warren perfect? No. Everyone still makes mistakes in this field. Ghost hunting had a very academic air to it. I mean, when you think about the Ghost Club, Charles Dickens, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle were in the Ghost Club. I mean, we have these rich academic men who are like, ho ho, let's go find spirits. You know, it was very much like rich man's gentleman's club hobby, that they would do while drinking. Well, maybe not drinking, but you know what I mean. It was very much a upper class pastime, it seemed. I mean, even Ed and Lorraine Warren spoke at colleges and universities. I mean, they were dressed very professionally. There was an academic air to the paranormal, and therefore a little inaccessible for the common person. Fast forward, the TV show Ghost Hunters hits television in the early 2000s, and everyone realizes that they too can become a ghost hunter. If two plumbers can go on ghost hunts and help people with their paranormal problems, then why not Joe Blow who works at McDonald's? Much of the style we see on the show not only goes back to spiritualism, but it also has the addition of tech. So now it seemed that science had made its way into the paranormal field. Well, one could also argue that it's always been there, but it's just that the TV show made it really super obvious. And of course, there were other TV shows like MTV's Fear, Scariest Places on Earth, where they had their cameras and stuff, but they weren't necessarily using their tech to prove the existence of ghosts, so to speak, not like the way it is today. So then you have K2 meters that were flying off the shelves. Radios were selling out at Radio Shack, and people were flocking to this new hobby, and it has stayed that way basically ever since, except now K2 meters and ghost hunting radios are now like triple the prices. Everyday electronics were then rebranded and repurposed as ghost hunting equipment, and then of course, you have the jack up in prices. So it's like I said, it's stayed this way ever since. Because TV has been so prominent in the ghost hunting boom, much of the way that we investigate today is influenced by TV. Give us a sign of your presence. Is there anyone here with us? Do you know that you're dead? I don't like that last one. So I mentioned earlier that there was this separation between us and death after the spiritualism movement, and the funeral industry started to boom with funeral parlors, embalming, and all of this stuff, and taking the work away from the families that originally bury their loved ones. And I think because of that separation from death, we've also had that separation from spirit, meaning it seems that we forget that ghosts are people too. They engage and interact with us the same way that human beings do, living human beings. Like, would you go up to someone and say, "Do you know what year it is? Do you know who the president is? Can you knock once for yes and twice for no? Were you married? Did you have children?" We wouldn't say that really to people, at least not in that way. It would be more of like, "Hey, how are you? My name is Alex, and I'm really happy to be here in your home." Completely different dynamic. You wouldn't talk to somebody the way that you would talk to a ghost. And I think that's why a lot of people get silence when they go on a ghost hunt and they try to implement the methods that they've seen on TV. And the big difference is we can't see them. I think if we were able to see ghosts, yeah, it would be a lot different. I mean, some of us may be running away screaming, but just because we can't see them, it doesn't mean that we turn them into science experiments that don't have a soul. So when you're trying to make communication with a ghost, I always say that the first thing that you should do is introduce yourself. Say your name, say why you're there, reassure the spirits that you're not there to harm them. Also, you want to set your intentions. Speak out loud that you're only going to communicate with the spirits of the property and only spirits of love and light. And it's also important to set your boundaries. If you don't want to be touched, say so. Now, I don't know like the rules of the afterlife, it's all theory. I don't know if like saying you don't want to be touched means that you won't be touched, but just set that out there anyway, because you never know. You might have a ghost that's like, "Oh, wait, I shouldn't play with her hair. It's good. We can just communicate another way." So after you do that, unless you want it to be a free-for-all, like, "Hey, anybody in the spirit world that wants to come talk, then maybe not set those intentions, but then things might get a little messy. Again, I don't know for sure. Ghost Theory 101. Meh. Then you want to tell the spirits about yourself. So you're going to be spending the rest of the night asking them questions and invading their personal life. It's only fair that you share some things about yourself too. And there's a reason for this. Like, talk about yourself, like, do you have siblings? Are you married? Do you have children? Did you serve in the military? Do you like baking? Did you go to school? Did you get a college degree? Did you get a PhD? Are you a member of the LGBTQIA community? Were you and your family affected by a major moment in history? Things like that. For example, when I was on the USS Hornet, I think it might have been 2012. Yeah, 2012. We were in the sick bay of the USS Hornet, and we hadn't really gotten anything during the night. And so as we were laying down, I decided to talk about my grandfather. And as some of you may know, my grandfather is Japanese, and he served in the US Army during World War II. And the USS Hornet played a major role in World War II. So I'm like, let's see. Let's see if anything happens if I talk about my Japanese grandfather. And as I was talking about him, I was telling them about, he served in the Army, he was very much for the US, he was from Hawaii, and he was affected by Pearl Harbor. All of a sudden, we start seeing these glowing green orbs of light. And I'm not talking about orbs like you see in pictures, that's dust or water and moisture and dander and all that stuff. I mean, these were balls of light that were very much emitting their own light and not being reflective. I mean, it almost kind of looked like, like fairies flying around. But anyway, as I was talking about my grandfather, those lights started showing up, and we turned on the light. We looked around, we looked for anything that would be causing the phenomenon. Nope, nothing. And we turned the lights back off, and I even say, you can come back out. It was really nice to see you. Let me tell you a little bit more about my grandfather and what he did during World War II, and the balls of light came back. And that came from me talking about how World War II affected my family personally. So by talking about yourself a little bit, what this does is not only does it allow the spirit to get to know you better, but the spirit might find some common ground with you. Like maybe they too served in the military, or they love baking and want to swap recipes, or they're bisexual like you are. If a spirit can see a part of themselves in you, they will be more open to talking to you. And it's only fair, I mean, if someone's going to ask you a ton of questions, you want to know a little bit about them too. Because ghost hunting can be an invasive process for the spirit. Secondly, when you ask your questions, ask them like you would ask a friend. I wouldn't get too formal with your questioning, like, is there anyone here, spirit? Because when you get too formal, it changes the dynamic of your position, your situation. You don't want to come across as too authoritative like a teacher or a police officer, because you don't know how the spirit's going to react to that. Like, you definitely don't want to come across as too authoritative. Now, I have seen researchers take on a role of like a commander of a Civil War brigade, and they start barking orders like a captain or someone really higher up in the ranks, and they do get a response from the ghosts. That's a different situation. Like, they dressed for the part and they did their historical research to make sure that they are playing the part appropriately. If you're wanting to get spirit communication as somebody who is approachable and as you, and not a character you're portraying, then yeah, you do want to be a little bit more down to earth, in my opinion. Although I am all for dressing up in period clothing and taking on a role, because that is also just as effective, if not more. You also want to pay attention to how the rest of your group is feeling. If someone is feeling cold, or they feel like they're getting touched and no one else is feeling that same thing, then switch gears and have that person ask the questions, because the spirits may want to talk to them instead. Thirdly, when you do get a response, always say thank you and praise the spirit for the communication. We don't know how much energy it takes to communicate, so you also always want to try to show appreciation for the effort. I mean, don't be patronizing like, yay, good job! Unless you're dealing with like the spirit of a 6-year-old boy that may need that level of reassurance. But it can be as simple as, oh, thank you so much for knocking, or thank you so much for the response. Down to earth. Don't be afraid to use trigger objects like toys, music, sewing kits, posters, artifacts, or replicas of objects from the time period, even alcohol and cigarettes. Don't use them on your investigation. You want to bring anything that could be familiar to the spirits of that time. Again, just as they can find something relatable in you, they can find something relatable in the objects that you bring. You want the spirits to feel comfortable talking to you. Now, these methods may not work for every location, and you want to make sure that you're flexible and can switch gears to adapt to the spirits that you're communicating with. And this is why going with the flow is super important. Now, if you're going to be investigating a prison and then you're going to investigate a mental asylum, you're going to be approaching these locations very differently. Just as if you're going to a haunted plantation and you're trying to communicate with the spirits in the slave quarters, you're going to be using a much different approach than you would a haunted house in California that was built in 2010. You have to adapt and change with the flow of the environment. And you also need to make sure you're being sensitive to the cultural backgrounds of these locations and of the spirits that you may be interacting with. Another tip that I find useful is write down your questions too. If you have someone that does do historical research before your investigation, have them write down questions that would be contextual for the time period so that they're ready to step in and ask questions, or have you ask the questions if the ghosts are wanting to talk to you. I'm actually working on a list of questions to ask during EVP sessions, and I'm hoping to get about 100 questions for this, and this will be a free resource that I'm going to offer, and that way you won't get stuck in spirit communication. Well, ideally. And really listen to the interactions that you're having and try to mold your questions from that too. So follow up. This is where the whole reflective listening technique really works. Like if you're hearing something like child crying, you can mold your question with, is there a child crying? Or is your child crying? So really practicing those reflective statements to show that you're listening, and also it may help you get some answers. Now, when it comes to the style of question you want to ask, I always try to do yes or no questions as much as possible because it's just one word. Yes, no, yes, no. Or if you can make the questions have a one-word answer of some kind, like what's your favorite color, red or blue? Blue. Make it as easy as possible for the spirits. Don't make them adapt to you. You need to adapt to them. Be careful asking stacking questions too, meaning don't ask more than one question at a time. What's your name? How old are you? Do you live here? That's an example of a stacking question. So make sure you get the questions one at a time and leave between 15 to 30 seconds in between each question so the spirit can answer. What you don't want is to talk over the spirit while you're talking. And finally, have fun. You're going on an amazing spiritual adventure. Be in the moment and see how much information you can learn. Be yourself. Don't try to be this big bad ghost hunter and provoking and doing all these things. Like, no, just be you. Just be yourself. And check historical records after your investigation and see if anything that you picked up can be backed up by historical facts. When that happens, that's pretty cool. How about you? What are your tips for effective spirit communication? I would love to hear them. And also, let me know if these tips are helpful to you. So let me know in the comments. And before you go, don't forget to give this video a like, subscribe to my channel, and click on that notification bell. And as always, feel free to share this video with your friends and family who also enjoy the spooky stuff. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next round.